Hello everybody and welcome! My name is HUZZAH. This is Civilization 7 and this video, I warn you now, will contain massive spoilers for the Civ Give, which would be impressive if it wasn't spoiled for you anyway, seeing as it was the thumbnail and the title for this video. Anyway, you've been warned. The Civ Give was an all-day massive creator Civilization 7 multiplayer game where we raised tens of thousands of dollars for charity. It was an amazing day. And again, spoilers, I won. Today I'm going to be taking you through exactly why I won, and we're going to dive into a couple of the viewpoints of the people playing the game. The Civ Give was an 8-player multiplayer game, and we had a snake draft for leader and antiquity civ. I got the first choice of leader, which meant I got the 8th choice of antiquity civilization, which is actually the opposite way around than I wanted. I wanted to be able to pick my civ first. Okay, fine, we'll work with it. I got to pick my leader first, and I picked Lafayette, who when I first went into this endeavor of preparing for the Civ Give, I didn't know who I'd pick, and Lafayette wasn't really at the top of my list. However, there was a certain thing that I had in the back of my mind. How do you win the Civ Give? Well, there were quests, there were activities to engage with over the course of the all-day game, but ultimately, if you won the modern age, you won the entire game. It was traditionally a very normal game of Civ, and I picked Lafayette because of that modern age. Lafayette is not very quick out of the blocks. His abilities, the culture and happiness, her age on settlements, and the increasing power of his combat strength for every tradition slotted into the government. None of that really helps at the beginning of the game. In fact, in Antiquity, he is, I would say, a pretty poor leader. But in Modern, oh, it was all about Modern. I'll explain why later. So who did I pick to go along with Lafayette? Well, unfortunately, most of my first choices had been taken. Carthage, gone. Egypt, gone. Mayans, gone. Tonga, gone. Pretty much all of the choices I would have taken had been picked as the 8th person to pick the Civ, but Rome was still available. Now, why did I pick Rome? Well, for starters, the extra culture on districts synergizes perfectly with Lafayette's ability. Rome just gains culture for settling wide. Lafayette gains culture for settling wide. It adds together nicely. They have a decent assortment of Legatus, Legion, Basilica, Temple of Jupiter. It's all a pretty averagely good loadout. Nothing in there was super exciting. Now, for me, it was all about traditions. Let me show you. When it comes to traditions, not every civ is equal. There are 2 tiers of civilizations in terms of the number of traditions you get. The first tier has 3 and the second tier has 4. Rome is a civilization that has 4 traditions. 1, 2, 3, 4. Why is that important? Well, unlike all of the other abilities that Rome has, such as the culture on districts or the one-off bonuses like Legatus gaining promotions, gold in the capital for every town, all of that disappears. Traditions, however, they get brought through to the next stage. So unlike most civs in classical exploration or modern ages, Rome will bring 4 traditions into play, which is really good for Lafayette because the more traditions I have later in modern, the stronger he'll be. Keep that in mind as we go through. The traditions themselves are actually pretty okay. Auxilia 3% production towards military units in the capital for every town doesn't sound particularly good at the beginning of the game, but again, you've got to keep your mind in for the modern age, and for the modern age, well, I could have 20 towns. That would be 60% production in the capital for military units. So if I wanted to build planes, battleships, tanks, that's a tradition that packs a massive punch. Anything that gives culture and diplomacy is always strong. In this case, culture on diplomacy buildings is reasonably useful. Food, gold, and culture in all towns is, again, one of those really handy cards that you can just take through to the rest of the game. Helps the town to gain a little bit of extra food when you found it. And production on districts in your capital doesn't sound like a lot, but 20, 30 production by the end of the game is quite a nice chunk. This is at the end of Antiquity. As you can see, we went 62 turns roughly. And if there's one thing you need to know about my start, it was very, very cramped. This was my capital. I had a little peninsula in the snow. Land to the left and below me, a little bit of land above, and here was the problem. Blackbeard, raising Zozo, was only a short distance above me. Now, luckily, I was able to spot this pretty early and forward settle quite aggressively, which allowed me to basically control this entire landmass and contain Blackbeard to the bay. I'm very glad that I did that. But that wasn't the main problem. This was the main problem. This is White and Nerdy. White and Nerdy was playing Achaemenid Xerxes, one of the stronger leader picks in the game, and even worse, was playing Egypt. We were, well, not very far away from each other, and in our initial scouting, I was bringing a settler over to go and settle Uluru, only to find that that was like 4 tiles away from his capital. It was always going to be a very, very fragile relationship, so I had a choice to make. White and Nerdy is an incredibly strong player. I would strongly advise you go and check his YouTube channel out if you haven't. I've gotten into fights with White and Nerdy in previous Civ Gives. They didn't necessarily go well for anybody, and I was very aware of the concept of a crab bucket. What's a crab bucket? Well, 2 people butting heads repeatedly, dragging each other down whilst everyone else in the game has a good time. I didn't want that to happen, so I offered White and Nerdy an alliance very early doors. You have this town, let me have this town, and we will send endeavors to each other. Not only that, but we will be allies, and this was one of the strongest choices I made all game. White and Nerdy and I threw happiness, culture, and gold projects at each other. We helped each other with wonder construction. We helped each other with the reform, Lafayette's unique endeavor that increases the size of my government. It was all brilliant, and as you can see here, we had an alliance brewing even at this point. The idea I had in my head was to avoid triangular war. If you are one side of the triangle with somebody above you and somebody to the right, don't fight both of them at the same time. And Zozo, well, Zozo was playing Tonga Blackbeard. This was always going to be a problem, and so you can see the amount of pirate vessels in and around my lands was incredibly annoying. I was continually fighting them. I knew the relationship with Zozo was going to be strained at the best of times, so by allying White and Nerdy, it meant that I could basically leave my right-hand border totally exposed and focus my limited armed forces to the north. Why limited armed forces? Well, you want to build and purchase and produce the minimum units you can to save yourself gold, but also production cost to get away with it. You don't want to leave yourself fragile, but you don't want to build any more than you have to. That's wasted production. You could be doing it on things like Colosseum, which I picked up being Rome, Gate of All Nations, which I beelined knowing this would be an incredibly useful wonder, and so it proved. 1 war support in all wars goes right through to the modern age. We'll come back to that later. Hanging Gardens is just useful, and here's Terracotta Army. Now the combo of Gate of All Nations and Terracotta Army is incredibly important because we have to talk about the other unique concept of the Civ Give, the quest system. When we slid into the age of exploration, we would have to re-pick civs, and there needed to be an order. Who would get to pick the exploration civ first? This is where the quest system came in. Whilst you could get points and push yourself up the pick order by doing badly in an age, which we didn't want to do, we want to play as well as possible, completing quests meant that I could gain myself points in order to pick a civ really quickly so I could get the civ that I wanted. You have to remember as we go through this entire game, I had quests in my mind the entire way. I far outscored every other player in terms of the number of quests and the points that I earned. I just completed more than everyone. Build 2 military wonders, done. Have 2 settlements at least 22 tiles apart, done. As you can see from this terribly assaulted flesh map, this was like 1 turn away from being raised, but I just about managed to hold on to it. I got the most points, which meant in exploration, I got to pick my civ second. That turned into a very important thing. Now, looking at this, you can see that I've done my usual thing. In Antiquity, you want to settle as wide as possible. Other people on my continent are very much proving this. Sassy Gamer Lady was playing Isabella and Carthage. At this stage, you'd only got to 6 settlements. Van Bradley of Ada Lovelace Maya was doing incredibly well in science, but had only gone to 6 settlements. And Raising Zozo's Blackbeard was on 4, very, very pressed for space. White Nerdy and I, however, had pushed to 10 settlements, as wide as possible. The more settlements you have, the more cities you have, the more resources, gold, production, general yields that are brought forward later into the game. It was really important to settle as wide as possible, especially playing Lafayette, who gains extra yields for settling wide. Quick word on mementos. A bunch of them were banned for the game. It's worth mentioning first choice mementos that I really wanted to take, such as War Club, which gives you extra combat strength for city-state suzerain. That had gone. Influence the suzerain city-states. Basically all of the good mementos had gone. I won't go through the full list now, but 1 cultural attribute point was incredibly handy because from turn 1, I could double Lafayette's ability to go to 2 culture per age on settlements rather than 1, and corrupt Corona Civica. I never really convert too many cities at the beginning of the game. You can see right here, I have 2 and only 2, which is only a single one that I've used gold on. Everything else has remained as a settlement. Rome does do well with towns, so you kind of want to keep as many as you can, but it means the extra settlement limit is well worth the cost of the extra gold on converting the city. Can you see the other part of my strategy I'd already begun? Influence. Now, by this point in the game, I had put a monument in every single settlement, which meant I had a lot of influence, more than anybody else that I've met at this point. And as you can see, there is only one city-state that I've suzerained. This is a trend you'll see all game. At this point, I hadn't really met many, but I deliberately avoided city-states. I knew that in multiplayer, they were going to be incredibly heavily competed for, which absolutely turned out to be the case. But I wanted to save as much influence as I could. Why? To do endeavors, which at the beginning of the game gave me tons of culture to push through the early game civics. It meant that I could get a very quick pantheon. It meant that I could beeline the Gate of All Nations. And it meant that I could go through the Rome tree to get my extra settlement limit super quickly. But this influence accumulation is going to become important later in the game. I ignored city-states. Just remember that, okay? None of my build involved city-states. Now, Antiquity is always a bit of a slow burn. At the beginning of the game, everybody basically just stays in their corner and works on building your own settlements, making wonders. Very little war is often done. This is exploration, however, towards the end of exploration on turn 47. Again, we went very quickly through these ages. It's worth pointing out when you look at the yields of the other players at this point, because I'm using a save file from the game, I'm loading it as a local multiplayer session to actually show you the game, and it counts as them being on deity. So all of these numbers are 80% higher than they actually are. So whilst White Nerdy's 500 science looks incredibly, fantastic, and he played incredibly, this was probably closer to about 300. Just bear that in mind. All yields will be about 80% bigger than they actually were. Now, who did I pick for exploration? I got second pick, and I picked Bulgaria. Now, why Bulgaria? I had already worked out my win condition. Can you see what it is yet? This was the most important part of the Civ Give for me. From basically the beginning of the game, I had to have a win condition in mind. I needed to either win scientifically, culturally, economic, or militarily. Now, economic was out of the picture. Economic is far too slow. It's the slowest of all of them, and culture kind of has the same problem. So it was either going to be scientific or military. And the problem with Lafayette and the civs that I'd picked, I just wasn't going to compete scientifically, which meant that it was going to be a military victory. And that's where Bulgaria came in really handy. Bulgaria only has 3 traditions, which is a big negative for Lafayette. I wanted civs that had 4 traditions, and with only 3, Bulgaria is a little bit lacking. They are incredibly useful, however. False retreat increases pillaging by 50%. No, it doesn't. Stratagems does. Here we go. Extra 50% yields and HP. This is crucial in the modern age. It's all about speed. You need to be able to bring your units through enemy lands as quickly as possible, and if you pillage any rural improvement, it heals you. With extra percentage pillaging, it heals you pretty much to full. So any unit that's got any damage can instantaneously go back to 100 health if it gets a Bulgarian pillage. Remember that for later. False retreat meant that all of my towns continued to grow every time I pillaged, so I was just pumping food into my empire, and combining that with Bulgaria's production, which only lasts for exploration, I was building all kinds of military units, which was very handy. And finally, there was a little bit of happiness and gold from great works. That's kind of a nothingness. It's the pillaging. Now, why was that so important? Again, look at the most important stat on this screen. It's not the science, it's not the culture, although I think I was doing pretty good on culture. Not so good on science, but pretty good on culture. No, it's influence. Nobody is near my level of influence, and I was only just beginning to cook this build. I still had the monuments from the first age, but now my memento choice had changed. I was pumping XP into my commanders via Lion Capital, and then I had the Flag of HUZZAH. Now, this was a memento my channel supporters picked out on all my different practice games. This just kept coming up as a really useful one. 1 influence per age for each commander promotion. Now, you've already seen that I had a bonus commander from Antiquity because I got Terracotta Army, which gives you a 3 commander, and this actually gives you a 3 commander every age. So by this point, I'd had 2, going into 3 in modern. But I was also producing other commanders, fleet commanders. I had 1, 2, 3 full of boats, and very powerful regular commanders. 1, 2, 3, 4, all with lots of levels. All of these were producing 2 influence per promotion. And as you can see, 6 promotions, 6 promotions, 5 promotions. There's a lot of promotions going on here. Influence was going to be very, very important in modern, and when I decided to attack anybody, I needed as much combat strength and war support as possible. So making sure I had a good influence build was important. I was also doubling up on this. You can actually see as we go through, yes, I've got some urban centers, but a lot of my settlements were hub towns. Now, hub towns are nowhere near as strong as they used to be, but they are still pretty strong, and I was using these to great effect. 3 digits of influence isn't an incredibly large amount, but it was more than everybody else had, and that was important. Now, we need to talk about the map a little bit, and you will see my empire expanded. 2 settlements. We have to talk about Blackbeard. Blackbeard was probably the most important diplomatic point of the entire game. Sure, at this point, my alliance with White Nerdy was still incredibly beneficial to both of us. We, by far, had more settlements than anybody else. We had expanded, we had a peaceful border. There was a little bit of army just lurking there, but I was always a little bit afraid of, but the alliance stood. Zozo, however, was playing Blackbeard. Blackbeard can always pirate units, and in exploration, you need to go out to sea. If you are next to Blackbeard, your boats will never find anything. He was gonna be a problem. Anytime I ever sent a cog out overseas to go and find land, all I had to do was meet one of his boats and it would die. There were also a lot of different quests that were involving war. Plunder 5 trade routes. Have a powerful army commander or fleet commander. Capture a player's settlement who has higher science per turn than you. Now, combined with the other quests which were all games, such as taking a capital city and things like pillaging 12 tiles, I had the quests wrapped up by this point with aggressive expansion. I took the capital of Blackbeard and the second settlement of Bathtown. And then because it was a charity game and I felt a little bit bad for attacking somebody so aggressively, I forced Blackbeard and Raising Zozo over the point of a smoking gun, a devil's bargain. We hopped on a voice call and I said, look, Blackbeard, if we make peace and you promise never at any point for the rest of the game to pirate any of my stuff and you ally me, we will have peace, I will leave you alone, and I will feed you 3 settlers, because remember, the pirates can steal settlers, which we duly agreed. I put 3 settlers into the coast, they had them all stolen, and Blackbeard went out and started to settle once again. And by the end of the game, Blackbeard had become, through a little bit of gold and some excellent sportsmanship from Raising Zozo, who even to this day, you have my full and honest gratitude for just being such a good sport about it all. Thank you for being such a good ally. Blackbeard and the pirates became just the thorn in the side of anybody who tried to take me on navally. He was there the whole game. And by making this early move and pillaging everything, I gained myself tons of food, tons of production, which I then made commanders with. We pumped out another couple of wonders, which are really good, like the Rila Monastery, El Escorial, Rihadiswara Temple. Yeah, there was loads of cool stuff around him, and, well, it worked. This cemented peace on the continent. I had the amazing Giga Alliance with Horse Lord Xerxes, the 2 horse nations of Bulgaria and Mongolia, allied until the end of this age, and Blackbeard meant that suddenly I was in peace. What did I do with that peace? Well, I got a bit lucky. Look at this. Treasure Island, just to my left. Let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 treasure resources in a small circle. I have never seen anything like it. I was generating 5 power treasure convoys. 5 power. What is this? This is a multiplayer game. This doesn't happen. I was able to sneakily gain a ton of points. I had full relics. I had tons of treasure. I'd settled far and wide. By the end of exploration, myself and White Nerdy were joint in the lead, and this meant that my attributes were always incredibly full. I was starting to bury myself down the culture path. I'd opened the militaristic path. We'd even started to go down the expansionist path, all things that improved the economy of any nation. And with 16 settlements, I was looking good. However, at this point, I didn't think I was gonna win. I thought I was second best. I thought I would be playing for second. Why? Well, I had seen a threat. And I think this won me the game. I spotted this early and I began to prepare for it. At the beginning of the exploration, I found Antiquity. This is daily Civ 7, an amazing player. Again, go and check out his channel, give it a sub. I had noticed for a while, again, remember this is 80% bigger than it actually was. Antiquity's science had always been high, but it was getting ridiculously high. And then I saw this settlement and I realized, we have a problem. Monasteries. Daily had been practicing a lot. Daly was an incredibly strong player and he had nabbed monastery spam, and oh my lord, was doing a good job with it. Monasteries are powerful because they're worth not only for science, which is quite a lot of science, but it's ageless science. This doesn't go away, and it meant that the 900 or so science that Antiquity had at the end of exploration, well, a good chunk, if not most of that, was going to hit modern. I also had been doing my own research and knew that Daly had been practicing the science victory. Specifically, there was a technique that allowed like a 10 or 12 turn victory in the modern age if he had enough science and a few other things to pull it off. So early doors in exploration, I realized I was in trouble. My win condition did not fire as quickly. I had to do something. We had to stop Daly out of nowhere. Now at this point, I'd been on the face of it incredibly helpful, incredibly friendly. I knew this betrayal was going to come, so I'd been building. I had 3 complete navies and a bunch of highly trained generals that were all ready to go. I actually spent the second half of this age maximizing not only the amount of commanders I had, but the amount of units I could bring through to the next stage. We were playing regroup, which meant you needed quite a few commanders. If I built enough, I would have a massive standing army on turn 1, and I suspected that Daly wouldn't. This was important. We had to get in there as quickly as possible. So we prepared, and we prepared some more. If you don't believe me, by the way, this is what Daly's empire looked like. We jumped in onto his perspective, and yeah, this is the island I could see. I knew about this. I knew I was in trouble. There was more army here than I expected. What I didn't realize was how much trouble I was in. This empire was absolutely packed with science and monasteries as far as the eye could see. The job that had been done in this empire was incredible. It was so powerful. I actually think if Daly had been able to pick up Achaemenid Xerxes rather than Pachacuti, perhaps he would have done better, perhaps he wouldn't have done, I don't know. But very sensibly, Chalcedony Seal and Glass Armonica have been popped in for the extra culture and gold on the unique improvements, and the extra science went in an alliance. And hence you can see 940 science. I knew I was in trouble. I had one job, only one path that was going to win me the Civ Give at this point. Daly was going to win it before me. I had to stop Daly at all costs. Operation Stop Daly from winning had begun. The first component, well, as discussed before, I had been absolutely blitzing through the quests, which meant when it came to modern, I got to pick my civilization first. This was the ultimate downfall for Daly because I was able to pick Japan. Why is Japan so important? Well, on the face of it, to be honest with you, they're not an incredibly good civ. They have 4 traditions, which is fantastic. The bigger the number, the better. And there is some decent stuff here. Little science bursts when we make aircraft or naval units. Extra science and production from specialists, although to be honest with you, I hadn't really used many specialists in the game. And a few combat bonuses for being near the coast. Okay, it's good, but it's not that good. Even to be honest, the extra production towards Dogo Onsen, the unique units, the unique buildings, none of it is going to win me the game. So why did I need Japan? Well, it wasn't because I wanted them. It's because Daly wanted them. Daly had a strategy to win the game in about 12 to 15 turns, and it all involves science overflow. Now, Daly had an obscene amount of science, well over the 700 or so science that you needed to generate the first tech in an age. Towards the end, it's a little bit more, like 4,000 tech. It's quite a bit. 6,000 into rocketry. You do need quite a lot of science to get down here, but because Daly had so much science and exploration, he managed to get future tech a few times, and that meant that he had discounts for a number of sciences in modern. This meant that it wasn't just a 1-turn science. Because he had so much science, these became 0 turns, and that's where Japan comes in handy. In Civ 7, you cannot, even if, for instance, my science was 9 million, you can't research more than 1 tech per turn. The game doesn't let you. It just simply adds it to an imaginary and invisible overflow that's taken from one turn into another. Except you can research more than 1 tech a turn. All you need to do is generate science in a turn. There's 2 main ways of doing that. Firstly, pillaging. If I was to take a boat, for instance, and do a coastal raid and found a building that had some science in it, like this one, I could pillage science as a yield. Now, that yield may may be quite small, it may not give me very much, but it recalculates. It gets the game to reset its calculation and triggers a second tech. Without this overflow, you'd need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 turns minimum to get through the tech tree, and then you'd have to work on the projects. Doing this, you can bring that down to 9, 8 turns if you've got enough science. This is where Japan comes in. This is the second main way of doing it. When you overbuild a building, gain science equal to 50% of the building's production cost. Anytime you build a building over the top of something else, you take a percentage of the production and add it to your science. Sometimes it's not a lot. Brickyards, for instance, in this instance would only be worth 13 science. Sometimes it's much more, 130 for a grocer, 232 for a unique building. Most importantly, you can spam it with enough gold and keep generating science over and over and over and over. If Daly got Japan, it was over. He was going to win and there'd be nothing I could do about it. So I was very happy that I got Japan. Now, in the end, they actually gave me a decent chunk of extra combat strength, which helped massively. This also doubled up with my mementos. You remember the influence per age for commander promotions? Well, this was now getting severely good. Combined with the hub towns, I was on 200 influence per turn. That's 3 times as much as my closest competitor. My influence build meant that I could juggle multiple wars and maintain a very healthy war support. I'd also stacked a few other modifiers. Gate of all nations, military attribute points. Having base war support means you save yourself influence so that the influence you spend gives you more impact. As discussed before, Railroad Tycoon, too slow. Culture Victory, too slow. It was a race between ideology, the military path, and the space race. And at this point, Daly's empire, well, I'd attacked it pretty heavily. We'd begun the age with our naval fleets ready to go, and a memento that gave 1 extra movement for commanders. I charged. It took us 5 or 6 turns, but we made it. We sailed over as quickly as we could, and we attacked. And we stole a significant amount of science. Not only did it add to my numbers, but it brought Daly's down, buying me time. That's all this really is, buying me time. Time is what I needed. Lafayette and my previous build had given me culture. Now, culture was a really good thing. Not only did I need to unlock all the traditions from the Japan tree, I also needed to rush political theory as soon as possible. Why? 2 reasons. Firstly, government size. In modern, there are a number of 3 social policy slots that you unlock via the civic tree very early on. Political theory gives you 1, and once you've picked political theory, you can pick an ideology. I went for the naughty government, as you might expect for somebody going to war, but simply opening this up on turn 1 gives you access to 2 more social policy slots. That's 3 right out of the gate. Remember I mentioned government size? You need government size as Lafayette. Beginning of the age, I threw my, well, then ally, White and Nerdy, a few reforms. I sent this to Blackbeard as well. We had improved the size of our government repeatedly. And it meant by the end of the age, I had 11 traditions in my government, 4 Rome, 3 Bulgaria, and 4 Japan. And this gave me my greatest opportunity. Now, this doesn't look as spectacular as it did in game because, again, just like the fact that the other players' yields have been boosted by 80% because currently the game thinks the deity AI is controlling them, it's also giving them 8 combat strength because it thinks they're deity AI. In game, they didn't have that +8. Let's take this fleet commander, for instance, with a few promotions giving me extra combat strength against other naval units, order giving me more combat strength for naval units, and the fact that I very deliberately and precisely made sure that I was maximizing as much as I could every strategic resource in the game. Niter I had maxed to 6. Oil I had to 5. Rubber I had to 4. Coal I had to 3. I'd pushed that as much as I could. This is a ship of the line. This is an unupgraded unit. As bad as you can get. This is an ironclad. I take my ship of the line, I attack the ironclad, and as you can see, I one-hit it. That's with a +8 bonus on the other side. I was rocking a +36 combat strength bonus. And sure, the commander's adding stuff, the strategic resources are adding stuff, fascism is adding stuff, but that's not everything. No. +11 combat strength from traditions. Lafayette, by this point of the game, had become an unstoppable menace. This was the one ability that I picked Lafayette for right at the beginning of the game, which was 10 hours previous by this point. I knew everything was going to come into the modern age for a military rush, and I would need as much combat strength as possible. +11. As you can see, it meant that naval battles were trivial. I'll be honest with you as well, land fights were pretty trivial as well. Now again, you have to ignore the +8, and I don't have as many modifiers stacked down here. This isn't as good a general, but the land ship is still with damage and with war weariness on plus 13. If I didn't have those, it'd be plus 21. That's almost in one hitting territory. I could attack wherever I wanted, and I needed to attack wherever I wanted. Ideology required you to capture 10 settlements once you'd picked your ideology, which I had rushed, and I knew I had a few targets. I attacked north and took 3 settlements from Daily, including a huge swathe of monasteries. Then I brought my commanders and I attacked this peninsula. 1, 2, 3 settlements all quickly fell. This, the old capital, unfortunately didn't fall due to a very ill-timed red fort bug, which none of us really knew about at the time, but unfortunately is a bug that sometimes happens where you can't take a city that has red fort. It was very odd. We made it to the gates of the new capital. We took this city and we declared a couple of other wars in the north, taking some settlements from Sassy in Spain. We took some settlements from Ada, Van Bradley, and we managed to push to the 20 points we needed. It was still not quick enough. Daly was working on the 3rd project, but I could then put all of the production in my empire, every single thing I had, into the capital and rush Operation Ivy as soon as I can. I've managed to pick up 200 production. We were flooding the city with as many production specialists as we could, with as many mines, with many resources. White Nerdy at the end of the game broke the alliance and attacked, and we only just managed to hold him off, again with huge combat strength bonuses. Just take a look at this one, for instance. Even with the +8 deity bonus and a level 8 commander, my land ship is still tearing this field gun apart. In the middle of the combat, that was a 1-hit, and what it meant was I had unobstructed access to a defense that just held the line outside of my capital. It was close, but it was outside. The production from exploration and Bulgaria's raiding had gone into commanders. The commanders meant I had more military units. I had enough. Only the turn timer was killing me at this point. Again, shout out, raising Zozo, ally until the end, sending me extra combat strength. It was incredibly important. And eventually, Operation Ivy finished, and on turn 30, I managed to win. Even though I was at war with the entire lobby, Lafayette at +11 combat strength is absolutely unplayable, especially if you go the naughty government. The fact that I had commanders and Japan's combat strength, well, that just helped. Again, I really want to point out just how well Daly was doing, even hamstrung by a huge invasion from me, losing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, most of a 7th, definitely 8 settlements, managed to keep an incredibly high science line, managed to hold off. I mean, look how brutal the combat strength is. The units were just bouncing off mine. He was just on the edge of rocketry, had planes, high-powered aerodrome commanders that were beginning to hold me off. And I do need to point this out. The worst lag I have seen in some time. Daly plays from Australia, and I have no idea where those undersea cables are going, but the lag that he had to deal with was incredible. I do think that even if we were on a more even footing, I think I probably still would have been okay, but it would be inappropriate of me not to mention just how much of a disadvantage that was when it came to war. It basically meant we were playing a turn-based game. I would move, and then he would move. I would move, he would move. It was strange. But yeah, fair play. Absolutely brilliantly played. I do also want to shout out my channel supporters. All the way up to the Civ Give, we've been running weekly games where I've been practicing and practicing and practicing. I was able to try so many different tactics, memento combinations, leader and civic ability switches, rushes for late game. If it wasn't for my channel supporters, I wouldn't be anywhere near as prepared as I was. And what can I say? To the other creators out there, HUZZAH Ryan, 2-time reigning champion. Bring it on, I say. Bring it on. The most important thing, though, jokes aside, was the insane amount of money that was raised on the night. So again, thank you everybody that donated. Thank you for all the support. I had great fun. Go and check out the live stream if you want to live it back. And of course, there was the main stream on the Civ Show channel. That was a little overview of the game and why I think I won it. Let me know in the comments. Were you watching live? What did you think? Did you think at the time I'd win? Who were you watching? What do you think I could have done better? I have been HUZZAH Ryan. I have been dreaming about monasteries every single night since, and they have been more nightmares than dreams. Ugh, look at these things. Terrifying. Why do they have that much production? That's obscene. Have a lovely evening. See you all later. Goodbye. And finally, a very special shout out goes to Glorious Petra, Clibben Ferdas, Poppy Dude, The Nickerman, Mushkin Mandeltort, Matthew Wilkinson, Paul Coffey, Toon General, The Uncivil Engineer, Radiatore, Debo91, Dan Jamo, Slither Alley, Scott Stratton, Skeptical Bear, Cinnamon Beard, Private Selection, Genoa Salami, Callum Billy, Garrett Gowan, El Truant, Creston, RB Hedged, Burial, I'm Daft, Gooberman, Dr. Bobby, Mixer Hematosis, Indigenous 68, Teddy Zursa, Barnaby Rex, Charlie Bears, Nate the Great, Alex Frost, Mean Penguin, Interplanet Janet, Frankincense Battlezord, Geography Teacher, Juvara, Morax, Sinikush, Echo Bear, Legally Trash, Sorted Dutch, Shadow of Gaia, Bob Tway, Abstract Fun, JB Genius, Arctic Fox. Thank you everyone for your support. Goodbye!